Hi, and welcome back. In honor of October being Down Syndrome Awareness Month, I thought I would take a small tangent from the Book of John for a shorter video. This topic is very personal to me. My daughter has Down syndrome, and since her diagnosis, we have come to know and love many other wonderful people with Down syndrome and their friends and family. It's a lovely community to be a part of, and since my induction to that community, I've been learning to better understand and advocate for those with disabilities, especially Down syndrome. My perspective on the Bible has also shifted slightly. Now I find myself looking for disabilities. Where do they show up, and how are they handled? And more specifically, while Down syndrome is never specifically mentioned in the Bible, could there be places where people with Down syndrome could fit into the story? I should note here that I owe a lot of my thoughts on this subject to two books. My Body is Not a Prayer Request by Amy Kenny and Blessed Are the Rest of Us by Micah Boyett. I will do my best not to misrepresent the community of disabled people, but I would encourage you to listen to what they have to say for themselves, and Kenny's book is an excellent place to start. I will also put links for several disabled creators in the description. Some I follow, and others I'm less familiar with, so this isn't necessarily an endorsement. Just a reminder that they deserve to speak for themselves. Feel free to put the name of your favorite disabled creator in the comments. Before we get into biblical possibilities, let's start with a brief discussion of the history of Down syndrome. Down syndrome was first medically described by John Langdon Down in the 1860s, and it was named after him. In the 1950s, as technology advanced, the chromosomal reason for Down syndrome was discovered. 3 copies of the 21st chromosome instead of the usual 2, and thus it can also be called trisomy 21. There are technically 3 different types of Down syndrome with slightly different chromosomal configurations, but this is the most common. Of course, Down syndrome existed long before it was named and the chromosomal cause was discovered. As far as I can tell, it is genetically feasible that it has existed pretty much as long as humans have been reproducing, along with other trisomies. Some recent studies have been done to examine its existence in ancient societies, and the main studies I found took 2 different perspectives: DNA and art. A recent study looked at the DNA of around 10,000 human remains and found 6 of them that had Down syndrome and 1 that had a different trisomy. The earliest remains that they found dated to nearly 5,000 years ago. It was a 6-month-old female buried in Bulgaria. A different study has been done on art and figurines found looking for evidence of Down syndrome in the features. This is more complicated and less conclusive, but interesting nonetheless. It is complicated by the fact that while people with Down syndrome do often share some features in common, like eye shape or a flatter nose bridge, these characteristics don't appear in the same form or to the same extent on everyone who has Down syndrome, and some of them can be found on people who don't have Down syndrome. In addition, there is the skill and intent of the artist to be taken into account. Still, the authors of this study argue convincingly that many of the paintings and figurines they mentioned have a high likelihood of portraying someone with Down syndrome. For some of the more recent work, there is evidence that the artist had or knew a child with Down syndrome who could have served as the model. This can't be determined for some of the more ancient work, but it is still possible. I also found a second article with a different figurine that argued for some similar things. From both of these pieces of evidence, I think we can safely conclude that people with Down syndrome lived in ancient times. There does seem to be some evidence to indicate that it occurred less frequently than today, which might be partly because most mothers tended to be younger. It's also worth noting that most of the individuals identified or pictured in these studies were young, children or infants. Because of the numerous medical issues that can come with Down syndrome, not many would survive to adulthood in a world with an already high infant mortality rate. Speaking from experience, most of our friends have had at least 1 surgery before they reach the age of 3. Others have had feeding issues that would have made survival in ancient times difficult. Because of this, if we are looking for possible cases of Down syndrome in individuals in the Bible, it's most likely to be a child. We're going to start by looking more broadly for any disability in the Bible. I should preface this with two considerations. First, disability isn't really a category in the Bible. Depending on the translation, you might find a variation of that word in a couple places, though when I found it, it was used to refer to injured animals more than people. However, there is a category that shows up often in the Bible that I think applies: the poor. A lot of things could cause poverty in the ancient world, but surely one common cause was disease or disability. It's worth noting that the Bible has a lot to say about how the poor are to be cared for. We can see how God himself cares for the poor. Jesus even calls the poor blessed. I think looking at how the Bible treats the poor, along with the widow, the orphan, and the stranger, all people on the edges of society, gives us some insight into its general attitude towards disabled people. Second, our modern definition of disability includes disabilities that are physical, mental, and even emotional. I think that probably all these categories of disability that we are familiar with today existed in Bible times and were experienced by Bible characters. However, I find the physical ones are easier to pinpoint, so today that is our focus. With those two things in mind, there seem to be two main places that encompass a lot of the disability found in the Bible. The first place is in stories of older people approaching death. For example, Isaac was effectively blind as he grew older, and various people are depicted as being mainly confined to their beds toward the end of their lives. And the second place is in stories of healing and resurrections, interactions with the divine. This is where I want to focus in a bit, particularly the healings done by Jesus. We already looked briefly at a couple healings in my previous video on John, and to keep a slight connection, we'll look at a couple more in John as well as other Gospels. A quick side note, though miraculous interactions with God or an agent of God often resulted in healing, it's worth noting that in Jacob's case, at least, an interaction with the divine results in a disability. And yet, at the end of that encounter, Jacob considers himself blessed. So we are going to look at some of the miracles of Jesus with a special eye out for disabilities and especially Down syndrome. Before I go any further, I should clarify that when the Bible describes a healing, it's often too vague for us to be certain if what was healed was an illness or a disability or some combination. Again, our modern categories don't exist in the Bible. In many ways, this uncertainty is helpful. It allows us to imagine many different scenarios and thus makes the healing relatable to a wide variety of people. We also know that Jesus healed many people, probably hundreds or even thousands more than those whose stories are recorded. It's fairly likely that whatever scenario we can imagine, Jesus encountered something similar. I want to look at one example in particular to start: Jesus and the paralyzed man in Matthew 9, 1-8, with an apparently parallel passage in Mark 2. In both passages, the paralyzed man is brought to Jesus. It is significant that his first action is not to heal the man, which to most of us seems like his most obvious need. Jesus saw beyond his physical disability to his true need, forgiveness. Though Jesus does eventually heal him physically as well, it seems like it was intended more for his friends and the audience than for the man himself. This is significant. I don't want to speak for disabled people, but my understanding is that many of them have no wish to be healed of their disability. Many of them regard it as something that makes them who they are. They may wish to be healed of the pain or medical complications that accompany it, but that's not necessarily the same thing. What they do wish for, and what I wish for my daughter, is for a society that values them as they are, recognizes God's image in them, and makes room for them. I think Jesus understood this, and that's why in this case, the physical healing was secondary. I want us to bear this in mind as we move forward. So I have 15 healing miracles, roughly arranged by type and tending from less likely to more likely to involve an individual with Down syndrome. We're going to skim through pretty fast, so feel free to pause if you'd like more time to read and think about the passages in question. Our first set of healings all seem to be adult men, and because of their age, I think these are some of the least likely to have had Down syndrome, but it's still possible. The first set also gives us specific disabilities that would have been considered disabilities with or without the addition of Down syndrome, but which are also known to sometimes accompany Down syndrome. This first group emphasizes Jesus' ability to heal people who can't walk, talk, hear, or see. All of these are possible issues faced by people with Down syndrome. Many of our friends have glasses, hearing aids, mobility aids. Some are mainly nonverbal. Any of these healings could be for a person with Down syndrome. On the other hand, all of these healings seem to be adult men, and as we've already discussed, it is unlikely that many people with Down syndrome would have survived to adulthood in that time. Not impossible, though. There is one passage that I want to note in particular, and since we're in the middle of a study on John, it's especially relevant. In John 9, Jesus heals a man born blind. There's much discussion in this story about, quote, who sinned for this to happen. Jesus firmly rejects the notion that sin is the cause of disability. This is important because people still ask the same question of disabled people and their loved ones today. What did you do wrong that this happened to you? It is important for us to answer, like Jesus, disability is not a punishment. It is not related to sin or lack of faith. Our second group is mostly children, and that alone makes it seem more likely that one of them may have had Down syndrome. We are, though, given even fewer details about this second group. Our first group, we knew Jesus was healing limbs or eyes. This second group is mostly people who are dead or dying. We don't know causes here. An infection, an accident, a heart with a congenital defect that couldn't take the strain anymore. There is nothing conclusive. But if I were one of the many artists who attempted to depict these stories, I would probably include someone with Down syndrome in the picture. There's one more story I would like to take a look at, though. I recently went to an art museum, and this is how an artist depicted Lazarus at his resurrection. It's an inspiring story, and there's no shortage of artists who have been inspired by it. If I asked everyone who watches this video to picture Lazarus, it's likely that everyone would imagine someone slightly different. We all come to this story with biases, sermons we've heard preached on the passage over the years, maybe people who we have known who we've mentally compared to Mary or Martha or Lazarus, or pictures in the stories we've read to our children. This picture isn't a bad representation. He at least looks like he could be a Middle Eastern man. But what if, instead, he looked more like this or this? I had certainly never pictured Lazarus as someone with Down syndrome until it was suggested in one of the books I referenced earlier. But as far as I can see, there's nothing in the story that makes it impossible. In fact, there's one part of the story that might even support that hypothesis. Looking at the text, I had never noticed before that Lazarus doesn't have any lines, but he doesn't. Mary and Martha have a lot to say in John 11, but Lazarus only comes forth from the tomb. No words. In chapter 12, he is mentioned again, but again, only his presence is noted. In the Luke 10:38 through 42 passage that seems to reference the same two sisters, Lazarus isn't mentioned at all. And interestingly enough, the house is said to belong to Martha. In the culture of the time, if a brother and sister were living together, we would tend to expect that the man owned the house and the woman was under his protection. That doesn't seem to be the case here. This seems to indicate that something unusual was going on. Maybe Lazarus was much younger than his sisters, or maybe he had some sort of disability, like Down syndrome, that made it more necessary for him to continue to live with his sisters instead of having a home of his own. Maybe he had no lines in these stories because he was mainly nonverbal. None of this is conclusive, of course, and I have no wish to force an understanding that might not fit. But for me, for now, This is how I like to imagine Lazarus, a young man with Down syndrome whom Jesus loved and resurrected, joyfully emerging from the grave to hugs from his sisters. I can assure you that everyone who has a loved one with Down syndrome is deeply aware of the proximity of death in this life. So many friends have needed heart surgeries as babies, and we praise God for medical advances that means that usually ends with a good outcome. Life expectancy for people with Down syndrome has greatly improved with medical advances and increased early interventions and therapies, but there are still always risks. The hope of resurrection is potent. In the end, we can't say anything conclusive, really, about the presence of Down syndrome in the Bible. What we can say, though, is that through his life, his death, and his resurrection, Jesus consistently reminds us that all are welcome. Not just the whole and powerful, but the weak, the poor, the hungry, the children. As we sing with our daughter most nights, Jesus loves the little ones like me, me, me.